If you're athletic, start now. Get rid of all these ideas of like heavy protein shakes and things and feed your body with raw, pure nutrition now. So if you do have an injury, which we injure ourselves every day with strength training, constantly breaking down muscle tissues, your recovery will be much less. And the tensile strength of what you're developing will be much greater. At the same time, the health of your tissue is also going to be preserved a longer period of time.
Hi everyone, it's Bee. I'm here once again with my trusty sidekick Buttercup, who's taking a nap, I think. That was just Chef Ocean. Today we get the pleasure of talking to him not only about how he became the raw vegan chef that he is, that you probably have seen at many festivals, including the Woodstock Fruit Festival, where he was the head chef last year, but you might not know that he's also an accomplished athlete. Chef Ocean is going to talk to us today about how his raw vegan diet helps fuel his performance, helps him have quick recoveries, and even helped him have a miraculous recovery from a torn rotator cuff injury just recently. And for those of you watching on a video platform, I'm wearing my chef's jacket today because we're going to be making a recipe together at the end, so stick around.
Vegan Health and Fitness. More than just your favorite magazine.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Vegan Health and Fitness Podcast. Today we have an amazing guest for you, Chef Ocean. You may have seen him on YouTube with his beautiful girlfriend, who is also a chef and a Swedish model to boot. But today we're talking about wonderful Chef Ocean, and he's an amazing athlete besides being a chef, and has an incredible life story that I can't wait to dive into. So welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that you're here because, like I said, I've been following you for a while and you have inspired me in so many ways. I have been vegan for 31 years, but I've just gotten into eating. Well, I've eaten mostly raw for most of that time, and I've just gotten into mostly raw. I would say I'm like 99% raw now. I just, for some reason, every now and then have to have a potato. But besides that, I'm eating all raw. And so looking at your videos for recipe options, and I recently downloaded your whole bundle with 8 amazing ebooks with great recipes that I highly recommend. So anyway, I'm so honored. But before I get into all of the stuff about your YouTube videos and your cooking and all of that, let's talk about your story. First of all, tell us, how long have you been vegan and what brought you to become vegan?
Oh, yeah, this is actually one of my favorite stories. So it's been, I think I started eating vegan diet in maybe 1997, I think was about the time. And it was mostly due to being exposed to other people who were following a vegan lifestyle and a vegetarian lifestyle. And it actually had a lot to do with touring with the Grateful Dead, of all
Love
things.
that.
So I had some friends that were, selling candles and root beer and things at Grateful Dead shows. It was a really big thing to do in the 90s. It was a great excuse to travel the country and travel around, meeting other people. And there was there was actually a couple moments. The first was that the people that are with wouldn't eat meat, and so that when we would travel to, for instance, Michigan or a show in Pennsylvania, I was living in Cleveland at the time. That's what we ate, and so they would make like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and things like that. Veganism wasn't evolved into the point where you could get fake meats. But I did have this moment where I was in the Grateful Dead parking lot, which is, pretty much a giant event. Most people don't make it past the parking lot actually at Grateful Dead shows because there's so much fun there. And I saw this guy with, tie dye and a dog and a pickup truck making grilled cheese sandwiches. And I have to say that was incredible. And I was expecting it to be really expensive, but he was just selling them for $1 because he liked doing it, and it was the most incredible grilled cheese sandwich I'd ever had. And that's what got me started on vegetarianism, because it was made with love. It was this guy that, he just wanted to like contribute. And so that's what he did, is he had a loaf of bread and some grilled cheese and tomatoes and cucumbers and these deluxe sandwiches. But what really got me over the edge was when my friends invited me to stay on their farm in Missouri. So they said, well, the whole idea of animal cruelty and animal exploitation, you really have to see it. And so I had read Diet for a Small Planet, and they gave me a couple other books to read, but I visited a chicken rendering factory. They gave me directions and to drive to the end of this road and just look at what a slaughterhouse looked like. And I've been vegan ever since, because that vision of seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of chickens just being bled out in a giant field on a conveyor belt made me realize that it doesn't stop. And I guess my feeling was that I don't want one of those chickens to be for me.
Right.
And so once I made that decision, I never looked back, and it's really opened up a lot of doors for me and led me to become a raw vegan chef.
Awesome. And I think that a lot of people might look at you and see a lot of the stuff that you've done later in life and think that, well, and also because you have a name like Ocean, maybe you have hippie parents and that they raised you vegetarian or something, but you're from the Midwest and you grew up eating meat, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. The area that I grew up in, the Midwest, there was never a meal without at least cheese. But sometimes two or three animals were served at the same time. Heavily influenced cuisine, at least in Cleveland, Ohio, was Polish and German cuisine. So that was not how I grew up. I grew up eating McDonald's, and our special treat was to go to Red Lobster, and we ate a lot of packaged food, standard American diet. I wasn't able to become vegan or vegetarian until I actually left the house and started making my own food choices.
So you just got lucky with the name Ocean. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's a middle name.
I love it. Since then, you have been involved in a lot of festivals, and the Woodstock Fruit Festival, you were the chef last year. I know you have been involved in a lot of festivals. Can you just speak a little bit about how festivals influence people and what a wonderful tool they are for reaching young people, especially?
Yeah, of course. So what I found at festivals is that it's a very effective way to reach a lot of people. And I toured with the Hare Krishna Kitchen for a long time, and their whole mission is to bless people with food. They serve prasadam, which is blessed food, and they offer some to Krishna. That's not my religion or beliefs, but I really enjoyed that we were on the same mission, which is to share food. So we ended up going to Burning Man and Symbiosis and Lightning in a Bottle and Beloved and lots of different festivals on the West Coast, both raw and regular festivals. And I found that the audience at a festival is often hungry and dehydrated and undernutrified. So it's a perfect audience for this type of food. And I've had many experiences where people have seen me at a festival, eaten some of the food that I made, and then either seen me at another venue or even at the same festival the next year, and just related a story about how that food changed their life. That they had never tasted food, being starving or whatever in a big festival and being tired and have their adrenaline depleted and having all this stimulation, but then having this gift of nature beautifully presented to them, and the feeling that they got from that, the uplifting feeling and the feeling of kind of like a light shining, right? Is to say that even if we're caught up in all these electronic music and dancing and lots of burning things and lots of artwork, that still nature finds a place in that. And that really warms my heart. And that's why I like serving food to people, is it's a way to bring nature to people in such a way that they can make better choices with their lives. And I think a choice towards nature is always a good choice.
That's so beautiful. Well, I love that you really paid it forward from that Grateful Dead show where you were so heavily influenced, and now you are doing the same thing for others. And what you were speaking of with nature really touches my heart. I mean, my cookbook, I guess it's over here. Oh, so that side. Back to Nature, there it is. That's Back to Nature, Recipes for Living Well. Available now on Amazon. Just search for Cookbooks by Chef B. This one has over 200 pages of mind-blowingly delicious recipes.
all scientifically proven to be optimally healthy.
And I think that you and I share the same philosophy that what we're here on the planet to do maybe is to try to get back to that Garden of Eden kind of experience that is the ideal for humans. And I love hearing your stories. So you went to Santa Monica to visit a friend, and then you went to Giuliano's Raw restaurant, which a lot of people probably remember, was one of my favorites also. And you insisted that they give you a job. And through that, you ended up finding other people and becoming part of a community. And through that, you ended up in Costa Rica and blah, blah, blah. And I want you to tell that story. So I don't want to tell the whole thing, but I want to give you the outline of what I want you to tell everyone, because it's such a great story.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's I would say that it's kind of the idea of trusting the universe. And oftentimes, if we take risks, those risks will pay off if the risk is for a good reason. And so when I was living in Pennsylvania, I went to college and graduated and then had a software engineering job. But when I started eating raw foods, it drove me to kind of live outside and spend more time outside. So I saved up enough money to move to California just by living in the woods for a year. I had a full-time job and had friends and a very full life, and volunteered at the local co-op. But I lived in the wintertime, and the whole raw food diet really served me well during that time. But then at the end of a winter, it was June to June, and I told myself, well, you know what, I should reward myself for going through like
So tell us
living out in
about
Florida.
that. So how did you live outside? I know the story, but go ahead and tell everyone.
Well, at first it was just I didn't want the deer to eat my community garden plot, and I was very happy because I planted wheatgrass and lentil sprouts and mung bean sprouts and arranged a little yin yang in my garden, and was hosting garden parties with my girlfriend and her friends, and they would come down and I juice wheatgrass fresh out of my garden. It was just kind of a fun thing, but then I noticed a lot of it was being lost to the deer. So I started sleeping by my garden, and that was fantastic. There was a big patch of mugwort there, and I had this fantastic dreams, and waking up in the middle of the night and just seeing stars and the moon, and waking up in the morning having bees fly by me. I just got used to that lifestyle. So when it started getting colder, I didn't really notice. I mean, it gets colder slowly, and so I put a little tent up and had some really thick blankets and just continued to stay outside because I loved that feeling of, first of all, not paying rent, but also just waking up and having birds and deer be my companions, all night, and having access to fresh food first thing in the morning, because I found the wheatgrass tasted better when the dew was still on it. So it just made a lot of sense for me to do that. But after living for a whole year outside, I was like, why don't I try this in a warm place? So that's when I moved to California, saved up all my money, put my stuff in a few boxes and shipped it out to a friend of mine. And that was the day that Giuliano opened his restaurant. And they dropped me off there and said, oh, yeah, I heard this is a raw restaurant and you eat raw, right? It wasn't a very popular diet at the time. But I was just blown away by his caramelized onions. And I had to ask them over and over, are these cooked? And he's, no, the name of the restaurant's Raw. And I wouldn't leave until they gave me a job.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then you went from there and you found a community in California, and then you found that you guys went to Costa Rica. Or tell us about how you ended up in Costa Rica and how that progressed.
Yeah, it just blossomed into people coming into the restaurant, and I was quickly promoted to one of the sous chefs and then eventually a head chef. But just coming in and having people to talk to after all that time of doing this raw vegan diet by myself in the woods and not wanting to share it with people, and then suddenly having people come in with bright eyes and beautiful clear skin and just fantastic physiques, and just inviting. So I got invited to a party, and it was just barrels of California avocados. It was a dream, to go to California after eating out of grocery stores for so long. And I volunteered on some farms. And eventually I met a girl who wanted to take me to Hawaii. So I ended up going with her to Hawaii for a little bit, working on a ginger farm, and the whole time just living outside. And then from then on, I just met some people who were into World Rainbow Gatherings. And so that's when I made a decision to just quit my job with Giuliano and just pack my bags and go to Costa Rica. And I was there for a few months, and I started a sprout kitchen. And I will say that was probably one of the highest points in my life because, as you may know, like you and I have this kind of shared belief, and we didn't talk to each other about it. It's just we think nature's awesome and think eating raw food is awesome. Being vegan is a fantastic lifestyle. But to go to a festival in Costa Rica and meet people from Amsterdam or in Japan and from Ecuador and all over Europe and all over Canada, and we all had the same vision, right, of just living outside, and it just made sense to start sprouting things. And people made it a kind of a fun adventure where they'd go out for a day or two and go to the local markets and find things to bring back for us to sprout and turn into crackers and pizza and hummus. And so I served about 1,200 people out in the jungle for several months out of a sprout garden. And we had a fruit kitchen where people could just come up and eat fruit, and people would go out for the day and volunteer at a farm and bring back papayas and coconuts and mangoes and just donate them. It was a cashless community, and that was just a fantastic experience. But part of the reason it lasted so long was because we were able to sprout things. We were able to grow our own food. In the jungle, things grow really quickly, and that we were able to sustain the community without having to, go back and get jobs, get typical jobs, and earn money, get food, because the forest and jungle around us is so abundant. I mean, we could just pick bananas. So I really enjoyed that time in Costa Rica and living without electricity with all these like-minded people. I wish life was like that all the time.
Yeah, there are some eco villages that have sprung up in Costa Rica. They're not living quite as close to the earth. They actually have houses and a lot of modern amenities. I'm sure you're familiar, but do you know, are there still gatherings like this happening? This was called a rainbow gathering. And how long ago was it? And does it still happen?
Yeah, let's see. When did I go to that one? Somewhere in the mid 2000s, and they do happen every year. There's national rainbow gatherings in the U.S., and it's essentially a freedom that we should enjoy, that the earth is our own. And we can gather in the US in the national forest without permits. It's our intrinsic right to do that, as humans. And the World Rainbow Gatherings typically are held in different countries each year. And it's a community that is completely fluid. There's no group of rainbow gatherings. It's just the saying is, if you have a belly button, you're a member. So you just show up and you bring what you want to contribute, and there's no money involved. People take care of each other, and they share food. No one ever goes hungry, and it's just a beautiful expression of being human on the earth without the idea of having money exchanged. Everyone's treated equally, and it's just a really beautiful thing. And I think that tribal feeling is lost in our society because you get taken care of and people really care for each other, and that's the whole spirit of these gatherings.
I noticed many people who I've been friends with who've gone to festivals, sometimes even just large concerts that go on for days, that people tend to group into little tribes and create little villages. And I'm sure you've experienced this at Burning Man. I haven't been there, but I've heard. And I know that so many people, when they come back from having those experiences, say how life affirming and what a beautiful experience it was. And it put them on a path to becoming a better person in so many ways, and to enlivening their lives and finding a better job and a better location to live in, and non-toxic people to be friends with, and all of these things that were needed because they experienced what it feels like to have real community with other people in an environment like that, where there's that kind of a freedom and a respect for everyone, regardless of class, race, gender differentiations at all. Everyone is just there about love. And this happens naturally. Human beings gravitate towards this, want this, need this. And that's why I think these festivals are such an important and beautiful thing. And I'm so glad that there's so many of them. And I'm hoping that they don't just all get totally commercialized like Coachella, and that we keep the earthiness going. Do you notice this sort of feeling of community happening in a lot of these festivals?
Yeah, it really is an interesting phenomenon, because if you look to nature, that's how nature works. It gives. I mean, a tree gives fruit. And all it asks in return is that you take the seed and put it somewhere that it can't reach. It's like this really beautiful, loving gesture. And they spend all their energy and their entire life just trying to get us to eat their fruit. And I think looking to that nature model, that how the universe actually works, especially eating raw food or living outside, we can't help but absorb that and use that as a teaching mechanism. I believe the natural way for us to live is to have a community, a safety net where people take care of each other and there's no judgment, and we're supported by nature in that. We eat fruit at these fruit festivals as a celebration, and they start off as flowers. That's why I have these flowers here, is that the same thing with a flower. It's meant to attract and it's meant to give, and it's meant, it's part of a larger system, a larger network of community involving bees and ants and pollinators. And that's really what these festivals have become, is a way for people to connect in such a real way that it feels more sustainable, right? It feels more sustainable to me to be kind to people and feed them than it is to be mean to people, right? Or be angry. That doesn't feel sustainable. That takes a lot of energy. And I think giving people an excuse to do that is what these festivals are all about, is giving people a reason to care about each other, right? Is stepping away from the money and the job and all these stressful things, and saying what's really important. And that's what I think is not only caring for each other, but also participating in something larger than ourselves, that we know that life is sustainable. It sustains itself, and we can either choose to join it or shy away from it. And that's what I think you're alluding to, is it's life affirming, right? You feel more protected when you participate in this natural network of sustainability and giving and love, like you said.
And the living outside part of it is interesting because we're in houses or apartments all the time. And I heard that you said on an interview, apartment has the word apart in it. And it's true. And I was like, wow, I had this epiphany when you said that. I've met a couple of my neighbors, been living in the same house for about 5 years almost, but most of them I don't know, don't commune with on a regular basis. But if we lived in tents or something where we didn't have the walls between us quite as much, I guarantee you we would be communicating a lot more. We'd probably be way more considerate to each other. Everything that you do would be right in the other person's face, kind of, and you would have a little bit more of an opportunity to reflect on, am I really being considerate here? I think there's this separation, and I know you work in the computer industry. I don't know how you feel about this, but I keep feeling like the more technology that we get, people think technology is going to save us. It seems like to me like it's kind of separating us. We have this illusion of connection, but how connected are we really? We can't let go of the importance of human face-to-face interactions, even though I feel like a big hypocrite saying that to you as I'm speaking into a camera, looking at you on my computer screen. I would much rather be doing this interview face-to-face, believe me, if it were possible. And I know it would be more enriching probably for us both to have a conversation face-to-face, but we settle for this sort of thing because it's like the best that we can do. And so I just don't want us to get to the point to where we forget. And I think that is happening with so many people. We forget how to interact with one another one-on-one until all of a sudden you get to a festival and you're living outside in a tent or in cabins or something like this where you're interacting with people more often. All of a sudden, people who are usually curmudgeons and kind of rude, and maybe they're even depressed because they're so closed in their normal lives, are now all of a sudden being kind and open and loving and gregarious and outgoing and friendly. And it's amazing how it just completely changes people. Don't you think?
I totally agree. And I've seen, actually, I mean, it's easy to idealize this, this lifestyle, thinking that we're all wearing, fig leaves and prancing around in the sunshine. But, people still get depressed and still get upset, but it's how it's handled. I mean, it's typically, if you see someone crying on the sidewalk in a city, no one wants to bother with it. They're too caught up in themselves. But especially at the Costa Rica gathering, and I've been to several other world gatherings, but that one was the biggest one and the longest one, is that when someone in that environment is feeling sad or having, negative emotions, it's amazing to see a circle of people gather around them and console them for no other reason except that they see themselves in that person. And it feels good to share, and it feels good to be recognized. And today that person might be upset, tomorrow it might be you. that distinction between people kind of fades away. And as you said, an apartment, why are we living in apartments? What am I apart from? We made choices with technology and with our economy that need to be addressed. And it's very difficult to address them because these are such monolithic, giant movements to, cook food, for instance. I mean, you take nature, you take it into your house and you put it on fire, right? Like, where did we learn that? We learned it from each other. It's being passed down. So it takes a very strong person to say, that doesn't feel right. What can I do to address that? And that feeling of meeting someone from across the other side of the world, or even like yourself and me, we're in neighboring states, but we're still hundreds of miles away. And then just having a conversation where it seems like there's a common belief that is just emanating from some source where it says, hey, I think we can change this. And using the plant kingdom as our teachers and even the animal kingdoms as our teachers, rather than trying to enslave and master those teachers, is a great first step. And it literally is just eat one of your meals as a salad. Go outside and smell some flowers. Go on a hike. Smile at someone today. Those are all opening up the door, right? And we're not going to get to this ideal society or ideal community right away, but we can take steps toward it. And progress is always fantastic. And I think it's wonderful to speak with you and have a conversation about raw food and being vegan. These are labels that we understand, but we understand them as like boxing people. But really, we're moving towards something better. And I think that's what it's really nice to see at these festivals and these communities is the feeling of moving towards something better together.
Yes, I know we're waxing philosophical here, which I could go on with all day. I love talking about how we should connect with the trees and with nature and with one another and that sort of thing. But let's talk a little bit about what exactly going vegan and then going raw did for you and your health. I know you had a couple things you were battling with your skin, and then we're going to get into that you recently had an injury and had a miraculous recovery. But let's start from the beginning and talk about how all along the diet has been helping you in so many ways.
Yeah, I love talking about that because it's, all journeys start with a single step. And so the first step for me was to understand digestion and how digestion actually works. Because I went to Carnegie Mellon and I have a science background, and I think it's fantastic. Science is a language, and I think it's fantastic to look at how our digestion works. And one of the things that I found is that in my family, there's a history of colon cancer. So I first started researching what puts me at risk for colon cancer. And it turns out that meats do, especially charbroiled meats, cooked meats, and meats in general. They're just very hard to digest. And so that led me to try to understand, well, what can I do, having chosen a vegan lifestyle based on my philosophy, of animals aren't here for us. They're here to participate along with us, but not to be enslaved by us. How can I make that fit into not hurting myself with becoming nutritionally deprived? And what I discovered is that I had no excuse because I could meet all my nutritional needs with the plant kingdom and not having to do any supplements or anything. And what I discovered is that a lot of these plant sources of protein, for instance, or carbohydrates, are far superior. And the main reason is because, for instance, when you ingest meat, you're ingesting a lot of other things alongside the meat. But essentially what you're doing is you're trying to digest protein, but those proteins aren't usable by our body. It's an animal protein. It's protein that's made by another animal for its specific purposes. So we have to break that down into its constituent amino acids. And those amino acids are then what we use to build our own protein. So our body really wants amino acids. So the nutritional content of, for instance, a sprout, the amino acid content is sky high because it's a budding plant that's trying to build its own structures. And so it produces amino acids as part of the sprouting process. And eating those eliminates an entire step of having to break down the protein and then reassemble the amino acids. Is just eating the amino acids directly. And then beyond that, we have these vitamins that scientists have identified. Vitamin C, for instance, vitamin A through K, all those things those vitamins and minerals are far more available from plant sources and are not available from animal sources. For instance, vitamin C is just not available in animals. So, and we need it. So you have to eat plants at some point, right? And so coupled with that, so let me just go back and say that what I found is that eating animal proteins or animal meats or dead animals, essentially, there's no excuse for it. We can meet all of our nutritional needs with plant sources. And this is from, researching white papers and understanding how we assimilate proteins and assimilate carbohydrates, for instance. So putting that aside, I was able to reduce my risk of colon cancer just by concentrating on plant sources and eating, lots of vegetables and fruit. And what I found a side effect of that is that my skin got a lot better. And I was struggling with acne for quite a while. And as a vegan, I was eating cooked meals quite a bit, but I was still having acne. What I discovered is that the damaged proteins that when I was, for instance, eating roasted nuts, for instance, or cooking beans, for instance, part of that is damaged, and that damaged proteins end up being flushed out by the skin. Proteins that are trying to be flushed out by the lymph system, and essentially clogs off the pores and causes acne. Once I learned that cooking my food was actually causing the acne because I was damaging part of my food, I switched over to a raw diet, which gave me undamaged food in its pure natural form. And within a few weeks, my skin had never looked as good, and I was actually getting compliments on it. Whereas several months and several years before, having redness and dry skin and acne, which was affecting my self-esteem. So it almost swung completely the other way, where people that had just met, we were saying that was one of the first things they mentioned to me. It's like, wow, you have really nice skin. What's your secret? And they want to hear I put some oils or lotions on, but I maintain it's not putting anything damaged into your body. Keeps your skin and your body from having to then flush out those damaged proteins and damaged foods, which then allows your skin to look the way it's supposed to naturally look without any oils or any other additives. But yeah, I appreciate that. It was just a side effect. I intended to try to figure out my acne, but I never thought it would come out it would work that well.
And now, how old are you, Ocean?
So I just turned 50 last November.
And you definitely don't look it. I'm 51. I definitely think that we're on to something because we don't look like other people our age looks. So I have read the science that you're talking about how heating food denatures protein. That's an absolute fact that there's no dispute over in science. So I know a lot of people who are watching us and listening to us are into bodybuilding and lots of different athletics where protein has become very important. And while we can dispute the numbers of how much protein you really need and your source of protein and all of that, once you've found a lovely source of protein like a bean, you can either cook it and kill and to denature that protein, or you can sprout it and you can amplify the amount of protein that is in that bean. It is your choice. And then when you ingest it, not only are you getting more protein to feed your muscles, but like you're saying, you're not going to have all that damaged stuff that ends up damaging your skin, making you look older, maybe giving you acne. And your skin is a reflection of what's going on in your liver and your pancreas. And as we get older, here we are embarking on our 50s, it really starts making you think about, okay, so as I go forward here, maybe I need to eat a little bit cleaner. Maybe I need to, step some things up and be a little bit more careful. So like I said, I went from smoothies and salads and that sort of thing for most of the day, and then maybe a cooked meal at night, to now I don't need the cooked meal at night. I'll have some nice cream or have something else raw. And I'm really enjoying it. And I've found that you can warm foods just fine in the wintertime. You can warm your food up to 110 degrees, which is just as warm as you're ever going to have a bowl of soup. you're never going to have a boiling bowl of soup. It would just burn your mouth. So, it's very easy. People think in the wintertime, oh, you can't have anything warm if you're raw. No, you can warm your food up just fine. You just don't cook it to death.
Yeah, but I love the idea of embarking on our 50s because in our society, people kind of dread 40 and 50 and 60. But I mean, I've seen your Instagram account and you're focused on fitness and your skin looks fantastic. Who wouldn't want to look like you do at 50? I mean, it's really a choice of what do I want to look like when I'm older? Do I want to be able to still be active, or do I want to suffer from these ailments that essentially boil down to what choices have I made in my diet and what choices have I made in my lifestyle? And making these better choices serves us better in the long run in terms of enjoying life. And I think maybe you agree with me. I feel more active and more fit than I did when I was in my 20s.
Absolutely. I also think, and I was a model back then, and I, did a lot of swimsuit modeling. My body is way better now than it was then because I've had all these years of working out. And so again, it's lifestyle. If you choose a fit lifestyle as you get older, in so many ways, you're just getting better. And yes, there are, some changes to the skin. It's not quite as perky as it was when I was in my 20s. But the wisdom that I have from this age, and like I said, the difference in fitness that I experience and how great I feel after this many years of doing this sort of thing. And I'm sure you've noticed the same thing. It accumulates, whatever it is you choose to do. If you choose to eat junk food, if you choose to have a sedentary lifestyle, that stuff is going to accumulate and catch up with you. If you exercise regularly, and I don't go crazy with it, but if you're just a moderate exercise on a daily basis, you eat organic, that's also really important. And you do these sorts of things, they all build on each other. And then you find you have a super strong immune system, you have great energy, you can stay active. And for me, more than anything, it's how you feel. It's not just about how you look. How you look is just a reflection of what's going on inside. So it's how you feel, right? Isn't that the same thing for you?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and some of my friends, my age, complain of not feeling good sometimes. And it's interesting because they know what a good diet looks like. But I think our society reinforces this. Everywhere you go, there's cooked food restaurants and, there's bars and things, like our society is kind of geared toward the opposite. It's geared toward making us feel bad, and then we turn to medicines that are made by laboratories to try to fix it. And it ends up being this very confusing battle of I want to feel good temporarily, and then afterwards I feel bad, so then I take something else to make me feel good temporarily. That cycle needs to be broken in such a way that it comes down to self-love, really. And it's about letting go, right? Is the temporary feeling of feeling drunk, or that satiated feeling of stuffing your belly really full of hot, warm food, is all we know. Sometimes that's all people know in our society. But then, as I mentioned, sometimes at festivals, they're introduced to food that I make that it's light and nutritious, and they've never had that feeling before. And then pursuing that feeling of feeling good becomes, for some people like yourself and me, it becomes a complete lifestyle.
Yes.
But it's about letting go. It's about saying maybe there's something more rewarding about eating organic and raw and vegan and exercising, where I would now be able to feel better all the time without having this up and down feeling, like
Yeah.
of feeling tired and feeling bloated. And it's odd to think that eating a raw vegan diet, or as I call it, a living vegan diet, because you're eating the life force, that's often thought of as like a hippie thing or like a health nut thing. But why are we normalizing self-hatred? Why are we normalizing feeling bad
Yeah.
and trying to temporarily, that it's just it's a mental issue, I think. And I think finding these communities and where people enjoy eating fruit and eating healthier lifestyles is like a breath of fresh air.
Yes.
And if you're ready for it, you breathe it in, and then that can lead on to, as we said, enjoying exercise. Like I dreaded running in certain times of my life. It felt like a punishment. But now I view it as an opportunity to interact with nature and to celebrate the movement of my body, which, some of my friends have lost a lot of their movement. And just still having that movement at age 50 and beyond, it needs to be celebrated. And to support that lifestyle of just saying, hey, you know what? I think I see a mountain over there. I'm going to go climb up that mountain. Sounds fun. And having the lifestyle to support that feeling of interacting with nature and enjoying it and celebrating our own bodies and celebrating movement, that comes with just starting with eating better and surrounding yourself with love and people who support that. And I think that's what should become normalized in our society, is feeling better and bringing nature into our lives in a very positive way. So I agree with you. It's interesting that we have this more energy at age 50 than at age 20, but I think we're more knowledgeable and we're more appreciative too at this age.
You were talking about how we have a society that's set up in such a way that almost everything we do for socializing involves going to a bar or a restaurant where it's mostly cooked food. I know it can be difficult for people who are trying to be healthy, who are trying to date, if you're single. I remember what it was like back in the day, going on Tinder or whatever and planning on meeting someone, and they always want to meet at a bar. And I would say, well, I don't really drink. How about this juice bar? And they would be like, juice bar? And even though they told me that they were into fitness and that maybe even they're vegetarian or vegan, I still was having a hard time getting people to want to meet at a juice bar or have the first date be at a gym and we work out together. Even if we happen to have a membership at the same gym, they really wanted that first date to involve alcohol, because so many people think that they're going to be nervous and that if they don't have the alcohol, that they won't. I don't know why they think they're going to be better with the alcohol, because I found that when I would meet them when we'd first start talking, I was having a great time, and then a few drinks would happen, and then they're drinking and I'm not. And then I'm going, okay, this person's getting a little goofy now. Is this the real them? What am I dealing with? And I think it would have been better off with the juice. But I mean, as far as them trying to be an impressive date, but people have this idea in their head that they need it to relax and to be their best self or something. And so what do you recommend? I know you have like I said, lovely girlfriend. You guys are long distance. I'd love to know how you work that out. But how did you guys meet, and how have you navigated this whole living in an unhealthy world and being a healthy guy?
Victoria and I, we're both raw vegan chefs, and she lives in Sweden. And this is an appropriate use of technology sometimes, as we would have never met had it not been for computers, and social media networks. So we met on a social media network. We shared some recipes together because she had a couple books published, and so did I. And so we just started trading recipes back and forth, and then just realizing, as you said, that dating scene is very difficult. And I was in a long-term relationship over 10 years with someone who is vegan, and it was a fantastic relationship, but we were always just kind of separate when we made our own food. She had a couple kids and they would make their vegan meal, and then I would have my raw vegan meal. And over time that becomes a little isolating, because it doesn't reinforce my lifestyle, right? It makes me feel odd or separated, right? I'm different. I'm over here making my salad or my juice or my gourmet recipes, and they would eat it, but they didn't have that passion for it. So to meet someone with a passion for raw veganism and for nature and wildcrafting food is like a gift, right? A once in a lifetime gift to finally meet someone that you don't have to explain yourself to. And it just feels right. And so Victoria and I actually met in Italy after communicating through email and for about a year and doing video calls. And we decided to stay in Ostia near Rome for 2 weeks. And then we went up to the Apennine Mountains in Tuscany for a couple of weeks. And our dates were literally like going up into the mountains and wildcrafting olives out of the olive groves that were there. Or sometimes we would just go to a fruit stand or a farmer's market and then get the best chirimoya we could possibly get, and then just eat chirimoya and spit the seeds out as far as we could. It's like those little kid things. I mean, we've often been likened when people meet us to like we're two little kids, but the simple joys of like going to a rose garden together. I mean, we went to the rose garden, and that's one of the highlights I think of my life, is going to the rose garden with someone that I loved in Rome. This ancient rose garden that's impeccably curated, far more rewarding than going to a bar,
Mhm.
right? It didn't cost any money, and sometimes we would just go to the beach, and just walk around the beach and wildcraft some ice plants, some salty ice plants off the beach, and then go home and make a salad of it. It's that merging of lifestyles that I think that's what really keeps us going. And the fact that we're long distance, we see each other a few months out of each year. But that's just something we have to work through, because when you find someone that you get along with so well and they just happen to be on the other side of the world, well, our philosophy is love is going to win. Like we need to worry about the details, but the attraction to be with someone that you can just be yourself with and not always say, have to answer the question, where do you get your protein? Or do you really think like eating fruit is a healthy thing to do? And just relaxing and being yourself, that allows you as a couple, as a partnership, to move forward and accomplish much greater things. Like we've written 3 books together so far, on our adventures, and going on adventures that we never probably would have done on our own. And so I think that kind of reinforces the idea that we're better together. Moving forward together as a community starts with your partner, and I think that's one of the most important decisions that we can make, is who we partner up with, and making sure that we support them. But to find that one partner that you really just it just works. So that's where she and I are at right now.
Yeah, in so many ways, you're just very lucky to find somebody that you have that sort of thing in common with, because it's not that common. And so good for you. And I just have to ask, you made salad out of ice plant, because we have a ton of ice plant in California on the beaches, and it's non-native and they're always trying to get rid of it. That's an excellent option. We can all make salads.
Yeah,
So
succulents are almost all succulents are edible as far as I know. And we went to Malibu. We were eating at some raw vegan restaurants in Los Angeles and got an Airbnb in beautiful Topanga Canyon. It was fantastic. And then I just said, hey, let's go to Malibu and check out the white sand beaches up in Malibu. She has a background in edible foods, and I'm taking an herbalism class now, so I can also learn more about wildcraft and edible foods. But she spotted this fantastic succulent, that in Sweden it's called ice plant, but that we have that as a kind of a category. I lived in California for many years, for almost 20 years, and ice plant is just a category of succulent, very easy to harvest. But this particular one grabs the sea air, the salt in the sea air, and encapsulates it in little crystals. And so it's a very like a disco ball succulent that when you bite into it, those little water crystals explode with salt water, and it's
wow.
like a salty cucumber. And she started grabbing a whole bunch of it, and she took a bunch of it home, but we were having that in our wraps and our salads.
What a great option for not using salt in your food, to just use ice plant. Wow. And so we have to figure out the disco ball ice plant. So now I'm going to be on a mission for figuring this one out. And I love that you're telling me that it's a whole category, so I didn't just go but I mean, knowing that they're all edible, now I'm going to start tasting them all. I taste all kinds of things as I'm walking through the forest, because I found out thuja is this amazing anti-cancer chemical that is in all of these like cedar and juniper and those kinds of trees, and so like I'll take a little piece and I'll eat it as I'm walking along, and it's so refreshing and lovely. And I feel like we have this disconnect from nature, and then even when we go on a hike in nature and we're trying to reconnect, we're out there like as strangers, like looking around like, what is this stuff? And we don't know that this stuff right in front of us. It's so funny when you watch these movies about survival in the wilderness. Somebody had a plane crash or something, and they're like, there was nothing to eat, so I had to kill an animal. And it's like, I can see stuff right there in front of you that's edible, that I know of, that you're not taking advantage of, and you're starving to death and saying you had to kill a little rabbit or a squirrel or something. How much meat is on that when you had an entire salad all around you that you're walking through? But we don't know all this stuff that's out. I'm glad you're taking the class. I think we all should. It should be required in school, right?
It should, yeah, you should. I mean, this is knowledge. Like people complain, oh, they don't teach us real things in school. I wholeheartedly agree. They teach you mathematics and English and these beautiful art forms such as literature. But when you're looking for that knowledge that sustains us as a species, that's far more important. I would say my college education uh, didn't stop when I graduated. I went on to go into these festivals and fruit festivals and learning about wild mushrooms and fruit. And now that's like my life mission, is to try all the different fruits around the world. And I have friends that, that's their whole business now, is they just go and they either grow rare fruits, or they find them. But as you mentioned, we're surrounded by food. Like it's that moment of a change of perspective, of realizing that nature, for all its dangers, right? I won't say, I mean, we're pretty defenseless creatures. We don't have like fangs and nails and spikes or any of those things that, many of the other animals have to protect us, or armor or anything. We're pretty squishy, but to find that a forest is actually like full of things that it's like throwing them at you. I mean, if you stand under an apple tree long enough, you're going to get hit in the head by fruit,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like the universe, nature, and life itself is here for us. It's our cheerleaders. It wants us to do well. I think it's sad that we choose to stay inside and sit on our computers all the time. And I mean, the whistling of the wind in the trees and all the birds and the marmots whistling, and looking at ants and bees, like they want us to join in, and they're trying as hard as they can to like make flowers, to like attract us to smell them and eat the fruit. They really, really are screaming at us to like, hey, we got a good thing going here. Like, what are you guys doing? And that change of perspective is so refreshing, to feel that we actually belong here. We're meant to be here, and we're among, if not the most privileged animal on the earth. And we waste all these gifts just by sitting. And that's what I think the living vegan diet is. It's a celebration of what we are and all the gifts that we've been given by the plant kingdom. And if we're not using our abilities to our fullest potential to support that network, then I think that's going to eventually end our species,
Mhm.
right? And so the evolution of our species, I think, is actually literally dependent upon us returning back to nature and participating in it in a much more real and supportive way.
I absolutely agree. And I think that you're an amazing example, because I know you work as a software engineer because you want to be free to travel, even though you make all these amazing cookbooks. Your job is to be on a computer, but yet you still find time to be in nature. You eat your meals outside a lot. I know you find ways to exercise outside every day. Tell us how you find that balance of having to spend time on the computer for your job, but yet still spending plenty of time in nature every day so that you don't disconnect.
Oh, B, that's a wonderful question. And I've been waiting for someone to ask me that for a long time, because
Yay, I win.
yeah, you win. It's a very nuanced idea for me. Let's go back to the Grateful Dead concert, right? We want society to be all full of light, love, and joy all the time. We don't want to have to use money. Don't want to have to work jobs. We want to just, sit in a hammock and look at birds and bees and have grapes fed to us all day. But in the end, we have to work. I mean, that's what nature and life is all about. We have to do our work, right? Nature does not reward laziness. It rewards innovation and ingenuity and creativity. So there's been some things we have to acknowledge, and one thing is we have made earning money a de facto thing. If in our society will barely blink if you decide, hey, I don't want to work a job and I'm going to starve myself, and you'll be put in jail for stealing, probably. Our society works against that, and so we have to embrace that reality. And that's the kind of the wisdom that I think you and I have found in our 50s, is that we want the world to be perfect, but it's not perfect yet. So we have to live one foot in the so-called real world and one foot in our ideal world. And how can we do that in such a way that we're not compromising our beliefs? So, in my opinion, if you're earning money, but then taking that money and putting it toward purposes that you believe in, organic restaurants, buying organic food, doing edible landscaping, having, like I have a couple bunny rabbits and taking care of bunny rabbits and, getting hay for them, taking the products of our real world jobs and instead pouring that energy into the world that you want to believe in. It's like taking, moving energy from one area to another, moving energy from something you don't want to see, pulling it out and putting it into something you do want to see. And that's how I balance it out. And I'm, an accomplished software engineer. I have a team that I work with. And what I've found is that it's about connecting with people. And that's really what our software that I write is all about, is how does this make people's lives better? And I found an interesting anecdote by the creator of Flappy Bird. If you remember Flappy Bird,
No.
okay, there's a notoriously difficult, if not impossible game that was on phones that was very popular a number of years ago. I want to say 6 or 7, even longer. And it became so popular that the creator of that game, who actually made it as kind of a joke to say, like, let me make the most difficult, frustrating game you possibly can, where you have to, like, the controls of it are very difficult, but you basically have to keep a bird afloat. And if he touches anything in the environment, that's it, game over. You don't get any more tries. So he felt so bad about the fact that his contribution to the world was, of all the software that he'd written, was now one that had people sitting in front of their screens like this for hours and days at a time, that he actually stopped selling the software. And I don't know if you can get it anymore, actually. And he said, his philosophy was that, I don't care that I'm making millions of dollars off of it. You guys need to stop playing this game, and I'm not going to sell it to you anymore. So I think that's kind of where the philosophy comes through, is what do we believe in? What can we take negative energy and how can we pour it into positive energy? How can we build our lives around that? So I can't quit my job right now and go live in the forest for 2 reasons. One is it's not sustainable. I'm not really supposed to do that. It's illegal. And the other is I would live an isolated lifestyle. No one would benefit from this energy that I have. I'd be a hermit up in the mountains, like I said, like looking at, like having bees fly around my head and eating grapes all the time. But that's selfish, in my opinion. And so working within the system to change the system is I think the best balance that I found. And 20-year-old me would not have said that at all. He would have been like, go live in Costa Rica, go live in the jungle, but so I think that's really the transformation, is coming back to society and saying, hey, I want to be a positive influence in the society. And that's why I love that question. I've been thinking about the answer for that for a long time, but we do have to acknowledge that there are real things that we can't change right now, but we can slowly move away from them.
That's a great answer. And I do think that our younger selves, and I don't know if it's because we were younger or if it was the era, but I think that in the 90s, there was a thing that was happening. And it was very interesting because I remember a lot of raw restaurants that sprung up in New York City, and I guess a couple in California, and yoga started getting popular. And, I don't know if it was for the first time, but it was for the first time in my lifetime, and I was in my 20s. And so it felt like, oh my gosh, everybody was reading the Celestine Prophecy. I don't know if you remember that book.
Four Agreements, yeah, the Celestine Prophecy, the Four Agreements, and the Tao Te Ching became popular again. Yeah.
And people were following the Grateful Dead still, and there was this feeling that we're on the verge of this enlightened society that's about to happen. And then instead of that happening, we went to war. But first we had the Gulf War happening in the 90s, and then 9/11 happened, and then we went to war in Afghanistan. And I feel like we keep coming to these places in our society where there's these crossroads, and either we can continue to evolve and become more enlightened, more kind, more in touch with nature and that sort of thing, or we can become more fearful and take away freedoms and take away interactions with one another just because of all this fear. And then we get to a point to where we have to re-evolve again or something. And I feel like, okay, it's starting to happen again. I think that what happened during the pandemic, and tell me if you agree with this or not, but it took things to a head that needed to pinnacle that needed to go to. We were kind of on this trajectory of separation anyway, and then we got to feel, what does it really feel like to never get to contact the people that you love and never get to see them, never get to do the things that you want to do. And I think it terrified us, and for once Spirit worked in the right direction, and we're like, never again, we're not going to let that happen, nobody's going to take away those. that many freedoms from us again and lock us down and keep us from interacting with one another, because that felt really unhealthy. And so many people got so depressed, and the use of alcohol and drugs just skyrocketed. Suicide rates went up. And now we realize, okay, we definitely don't want that. How can we now come? So now all of a sudden, people are traveling more than they've traveled in decades. People are going to festivals, and new opportunities to interact are just popping up everywhere like never before, because we were starved of it for a couple years. And so now it feels like, oh, maybe we're on the verge of this enlightened society that could happen. But then, of course, there's always this looming threat of war. What's going on with, Russia, with Ukraine, and what's going on with Taiwan and China. Are we on the verge of war with all these? Are we on the verge of World War III? Nuclear war is a possibility. So all this fear keeps coming in, and I feel like it's almost squelching our positivity and our hope. And so I feel like those of us who care about this sort of thing, like you say, can't be hermits. You can't hide ourselves away. We have to get out there, and we have to inspire other people, which I, really admire what you and Victoria do, inspiring people with your traveling and the type of food that you make and your relationship. And thank you for doing that so openly and sharing it with us on YouTube, because I do think that when people see, they will imitate. And so we need more of that.
Yeah, we need to know what better looks like before we can go toward it, I think. And like you mentioned, I think there's, like, are we going to war, or are these group of people that we've elected to give them power over the military going to war? Because, there's really a separation. And I think that these ideas of good and evil, they're propagated through our society. I mean, we watch movies all the time, and it's become normalized that violence is in movies, and even the language that we use, like, you fight diseases, or, it's a battle against poverty.
Right.
Like the way we phrase everything is really coming from this militaristic point of view. And I think that's like a meme that's invaded our society, and that we bought into it, but it's really not serving us very well. But one thing that reassures me sometimes is these ideas don't go out without a fight, like without flaring up, right? As you mentioned, like us being separated from each other for 2 or 3 years, that was a big flare up of what does our society look like if we just interact with avatars all day? And we're afraid to, we have to have masks on our face. We're afraid of other people. We're told to be afraid of other people. If things hadn't come to a head, maybe that would continue. But now, I mean, even masks not being used here in Oregon, it was just a month ago that you don't have to wear a mask in the waiting room at a dentist, for instance. And the idea of treating people or viewing them as like dangerous to ourselves, there has to be this like contraction to the point where the pressure gets so big that it just flares out and destroys the idea forever. But without that pressure, without that coming to a head, that extreme level, the idea just propagates and it just lives on, right? So that's what I think of with this militaristic society that we're living in. It starts with our attitude toward the animals, first of all. And I firmly believe that 50 or 100 years from now, we will look back on our treatment of animals the same way that we look back on our treatment of minorities, right? As we did 200 years ago, like how we used military power to enslave people, right? We do the same thing to animals now, and it's become normalized. But in my opinion, we can evolve as a society to now view that as we did that a couple hundred years ago. That doesn't make sense anymore, right? And I believe that funding nuclear weapons and funding war to that level, that will eventually also become silly. Our perspective will change. So it's okay that these things persist, but it's not okay that we fuel them, right?
Yeah, it's taking some time for us to evolve in the right direction. And in the meantime, those of us who are peace-minded and want to see things maybe evolve faster, feel frustrated sometimes and depressed. And as a martial artist, someone who has a couple black belts, let's talk about that and tell me about how I love how people think of training of martial arts. I guess it's the Karate Kid metaphors, is they think of Cobra Kai as being like what typical martial artists are like. They're out for a fight. They, you know, they want to be tough guys and they're trying to prove themselves and that sort of thing. But then there's the Mr. Miyagi, and it's like, no, it's moving like water, and you're actually using your opponent's forces. And I love something that I also heard you say in another interview. You're putting people into a position where they're starting to understand that their own aggression is hurting themselves. And I thought, what a beautiful metaphor for life. And if we could only live our lives that way, that when we're faced with conflict, instead of meeting that conflict head on, which often just creates destruction, finding ways to put the other person in a position to where they will have an epiphany and realize, hey, your aggression is hurting yourself. That philosophy may be something we could learn from that would help us overcome the things that are bringing us down.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned water, because the martial art that I study, Hapkido, is based on the movements of water. And there's actually a principle called the water principle, which is to say that water doesn't move a rock down the stream by using its force. It moves around the rock, and the rock eventually goes with the flow of the water. So it doesn't, if you're just punching a rock over and over, that's considered a hard martial art. But if you're going around the rock, right, and showing the rock which direction you want it to move in, a more positive direction downstream, then the rock will comply and might even think it's its own idea, right? And so the martial art that I study has no offensive moves in it. It all starts with being grabbed or attacked with shoulder grabs or arm grabs. And it's a real world martial art, which means that it's not a showy martial art whatsoever. In fact, Hapkido is often known for what people watching and being like, I don't understand what just happened. Now what did you do? You know? And so learning the techniques that I learned, they're considered, I would say, an extension of massage, in the sense that when you massage someone, they have these key points, right? These pressure points, and you're moving energy in a certain direction to try to help the person. You know, lymph massage being a good example of that. We use the same points in the martial art that I study, but it's the amount of pressure that we use on them. For instance, your hand only moves so many directions, right? So it doesn't move very well this way. Like my joint doesn't move very well that way. So if you're able to hold someone in a position where the only movement that they can do is one that hurts, right? So you're just holding them. And then they realize that the more I move, the more I hurt. You're not necessarily applying pain to them. What you're asking them to do is bring them back to center. The centered feeling of meditative state, realizing what they're doing. And the martial art is more oriented toward a situation where you have a drunk friend, right? Or you have someone who's just getting a little bit too aggressive, right? And is not respecting your boundaries. Is what you do is you set up a boundary for them. And that boundary then, instead of, as they move past a boundary, the one that is being hurt is no longer you. You've placed yourself in a safe position, but instead you redirect the energy so that as they cross that boundary, that pain is being directed back toward them. And to alleviate the pain, they should stop moving or retreat or retreat back across the boundary. And it's the only martial art I care to study. Any other martial art that would involve, you know, what happens if, you know, like punching someone just out of the blue for no reason, I have no interest in that whatsoever, because it doesn't teach them anything. But I actually had an incident one time where someone grabbed my hair at a concert because they were drunk, and I just took their hand and pressed it against my head, and then turned in such a way that that if they kept grabbing my hair, it would hurt, right? But all I did is I pressed their hand on top of my head. I didn't try to rip their hand off or anything. And so their only choice was to let go. And later on, they actually, you know, said they apologized for, you know, what they did, but it became a lesson for them of like what boundaries are. And we need to respect other people's boundaries, especially when they're not the same as our own. So martial arts is a very real way to do that, right? And so thank you for mentioning martial arts, because there is this little incongruity, but it was really, I learned martial arts so that I could travel more effectively. And what I've found is that a smile is the most disarming self-defense possible. If someone is trying to, bully you or tease you or attack you in some way, just to smile and laugh and trying to connect with people
Mhm.
is an incredibly effective disarming technique. And that's the one I use far more often than any physical technique.
That's beautiful. I do too. And I haven't studied the martial arts like you have, so I'm glad that that was an instinctual thing that I've noticed in many situations where something dangerous seemed like it could happen, that simply showing the other person that I see them and that I am friendly and I'm not a threat and that I, mean no harm. I find that most people are acting out of fear. And if you respond to that fear, not with the aggression, which would feed that fear, but with kindness, you do kill them with kindness, that they get confused.
It's very disarming. Yeah.
Speaking of martial arts, let's go ahead and talk about your shoulder injury. You had a really bad injury recently, and you sent me some medical images. So tell us about exactly what happened and what am I seeing in these pictures?
So what happened is I was teaching as a second degree black belt. I was responsible in the school that I was at for preparing other black belts for either their first degree or second degree test. His reaction to my trying to show him a move was to over rotate my arm backwards, and did a complete rotation to the point where, if you can imagine, that I kept rotating my hand to where it now touched my hip. So it kept rotating my elbow past my head to the point where my elbow was now upside down but pointing backwards behind me. So I got a 50% full tear in my rotator cuff, though it actually made a tearing sound. We thought that my uniform had ripped, but it was a pulled my shoulder out of its socket, and then my arm was basically hanging there upside down just by some thread. So essentially ripped my shoulder out of its socket along with most of the tendons. So the pictures that you're looking at there, one of them shows the torn tendon, which is considered, at my age, it's considered almost irrecoverable. You're most likely going to have a bad shoulder for the rest of your life, because as you're younger, you can grow collagen and you can grow those tendons fairly easily. But over time, people who have those type of injuries are often degenerative, which means that the shoulder just wears out. Or you see them in extreme athletes, or a traumatic injury. Someone's in a car accident or they jump off a bridge and they tear their shoulder. And then the other photos are showing the repair that he did. And the surgeon is a world-class surgeon, but he said this was one of the most challenging ones he'd ever done. So I ended up with 7 screws in my shoulder. And then the ropes that you're seeing there are actually him tying the tendon back to the top of the shoulder joint.
Wow.
And so you hold it there. And the prognosis was not good. He managed my expectations. He said, worst comes to worst, we're going to have to put some material for him back and graft it on there just so you can scratch your head. And when I went in for evaluation, I was not able to lift my arm above here. And so you'll see a physical therapy report where he just says NT, which is essentially, we didn't even try to do some of the tests because the shoulder injury was so severe. But coupled with a full tear in a full shoulder dislocation, that was something that they had only seen a couple cases of between the physical therapist and the shoulder surgeon in 30 years. So I made it my life goal to understand what my role was in healing this injury. And I will tell you that moving to a raw vegan diet after you've been injured is not the solution. You have to be on a raw vegan or a living vegan diet before you're injured, because switching the diet is going to cause more complications, because your body is now adjusting to a new diet and is detoxing, for instance. So preparation for this as a living vegan athlete, that was to my advantage to already be on a living vegan's diet. When you feed your body undamaged food, it's going to be able to utilize 100% of that food toward its purposes. And when you have an injury, its purpose is now to fix that injury. So I was eating very highly nutritious foods, getting lots of vitamin C, lots and lots of sprouts, because protein helps in rebuilding cells. But the idea was that all the food that I gave my body, it didn't have to sift through it and look for the damaged things. It was able to use all of the nutrition that I was giving it for its purposes. So after 6 weeks, the sling came off. I went back to the doctor and he cleared me for my first set of physical therapy, which was now to go back into the gym and start doing strengthening exercises. So again, I changed my diet to be very, very high protein. I'd already learned about protein from doing my Muscle Fuel book, Living Foods for Athletes. And so they had not seen this level of recovery because typically people are smokers, they're drinkers. In fact, some surgeons won't even do a surgery for rotator cuff repair if someone's a smoker because their tendons are so paper thin that it's just going to re-injure and they're going to do more damage. So in preparation for this, and he said, I've only had one person with this type of injury. It was a 20-year-old. He did a full recovery. As I progressed in my physical therapy, I was disciplined. I followed instructions, feeding myself properly. And properly meaning going above and beyond what one wouldn't consider properly. So the recovery that I made was astounding. I ended my physical therapy early. You'll see the report that he capitalizes full recovery. I have no lingering issues from this. In fact, you can see a picture of me doing a yoga headstand. I'm doing hot yoga two days a week. I'm climbing 2 days a week, running 20 kilometers a week. On top of all that, I'm also going to the gym 3 times a week and continuing with this physical therapy program. I attribute almost 100% of it to the fact that I fed my body properly during recovery. And that's what I advocate for people is if you're athletic, start now. Get rid of all these ideas of like these heavy protein shakes and things and feed your body with raw, pure nutrition now. So if you do have an injury, which we injure ourselves every day with strength training, constantly breaking down muscle tissues, your recovery will be much less. And the tensile strength of what you're developing will be much greater. At the same time, the health of your tissue is also going to be preserved a longer period of time. So the body is essentially a verb. And if you feed it the proper nutrition and you do the exercises that you enjoy, strength training, yoga, running, and rock climbing are what I enjoy doing, as well as long walks and things, you will astound your doctors and astound your physical therapists and your trainers and fellow athletes and your coaches, only because you're now superpowering your body with proper, unadulterated, undamaged nutrition. And the potentials of our bodies when they're under those circumstances is far beyond what you read about in the medical journals, because everyone there is eating cooked food, eating a carnivorous diet. So there's no comparison whatsoever. So in fact, I went back to my doctor and was telling him, like, I'm rock climbing. He's like, I didn't think you'd ever be able to rock climb again. And I said, you know what? I'm actually surprised that you would say that because it's a positive attitude that gets you through these things, right? And you don't want to hear your doctor saying, like, I didn't think you were ever going to be able to do this again. But I feel that this diet is brand new territory for athletes. And I don't think anyone's ever seen Living Vegan, soccer team, for instance, or a Living Vegan team of sprinters. And I love working with athletes because I really, really, really want to see what a team of rock climbers can do on a Living Vegan diet or a vegan diet. And I think this is where the idea of steroids and bioengineering and life hacking, just go with what's normal, which is eating living vegan foods, and see where that takes you. And I think our potential as humans is going to be realized with that diet rather than chemicals and steroids and things like that.
It's definitely going with what's natural. I don't know if it's going with what's normal in our society. As you say, we don't even know what it looks like in so many sports for athletes to consume living foods. I know Dr. Doug Graham coached Martina Navratilova when she was a world champion tennis player. That was back in the 80s. And it seems like there's a lot of athletes that I have worked with also that choose to eat either just vegan or sometimes even all living foods, what we call raw foods, right before something, whether it be a UFC match or a tennis match or football season's about to start or baseball season's about to start. They'll do it for a few months before to boost their performance. And then in the off season, they'll eat all kinds of junk. And there's very few of them that can be disciplined enough to do it all year round. But the ones that do decide to do it even short term, they notice such a huge benefit that it's it's great to see more and more of them embracing it, but we're still not to the point to where we're seeing it on a large enough scale. And so, yeah, it's great for people to contact people like you. Chef Ocean is available. I do this kind of coaching too, but we're talking about Chef Ocean today. He offers remote lessons, meal plans, consultations, and coaching of all sorts. And since you have such a complex background in athletics, and then you've had an injury that you have so well healed from, that I think that all of that plays into you having a lot to give.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you, because it's raw vegan diet is often relegated to people who are dying of a disease, right? It's a cancer preventative diet. It's people's last resort, right? They go to Tree of Life or Hippocrates Institute because they have serious health issues. What if we flip that perspective and say, what would happen if you're a healthy person, you eat this diet and you continue doing it for a very long time? That would make sense, that would elevate someone far beyond what they were even imagining they'd be capable of. And it's so exciting to me. I have a very aggressive workout routine. You know, I've done half marathons in the past. I'm working on my marathon now. But at the same time, it astounds me that the workouts that I used to do when I was 20 were like a chore. But now I'm like, this is great, because I can see progress, right? Is every time I go to another hot yoga session, I can get a little farther down. I'm holding these poses longer. I can do binds that I never thought possible. When I'm running, I actually feel good at the end of the run, not rather than like, like terrible. And I'm like, it's just the enjoyment, I think, of the sport is often lacking, is that people want to do performance and they think you have to like completely exhaust yourself and not feel good anymore, and like get to a point where you're injuring yourself. But what if we played these sports, or what if we did these exercises in such a way that we actually do them just for enjoyment? Like, those are things that we really don't measure as athletes. How much do you enjoy what you're doing? That, I think, is intrinsic in a raw vegan diet, because the recovery is so much better.
Yes.
And I don't go on runs to punish myself.
No.
I go on runs because it's a nice day outside.
I once ran a 50K in San
Wow.
Antonio, Texas on July 4th, which was really hot and humid. Finished that race, went home, didn't cook, but prepared myself my own dinner, and was fine. People came over thinking that they were going to have to take care of me, and I was taking care of them. People were amazed, but that is what happens when you live this kind of lifestyle, is that the recovery, it was instantaneous. It was amazing. And the day afterwards, everybody's like, it's going to hit you now. It's going to hit you now. I was like, I'm fine. I think it's because we don't have anything toxic that our body needs to get rid of. And I think that when you really push yourself athletically, your body is like, okay, we really got to get rid of these toxins now, because we have, all kinds of stuff to repair. So that stuff is getting in the way. And then of course you have more lactic acid, because, your system is more acidic whenever you're not eating healthy. And what we're going to get to next, finally, is the pleasure part of it. A lot of people think, oh, well, if I eat raw, it's going to be nothing but salad, maybe some smoothies, which I love salads and smoothies. So that does not sound like torture to me. But for a lot of people, I guess that maybe they've never had one of my smoothies, because they're like the most decadent dessert ever. And, salads that are very complex with lots of different flavors to me, crunches and different textures. Are amazing, but we're going to make something together now.
Yes.
I have my outfit on, and
I have my outfit on too. So we're going to make the California wrap, and the reason I call it a California wrap is because it has some of my favorite ingredients from California. California is well known for its fresh produce, so we're going to be using arugula, have some cremini mushrooms, some zucchini, and some coconuts too. So I drank a lot of coconuts when I was living in California. So yeah, let me switch over to my kitchen.
Okay, here we are. I'm so excited. We're going to make an exclusive recipe with Chef Ocean. This isn't even in one of his cookbooks. And so I'll let him take it away and explain what we're making today.
Yeah, so this is a recipe that I like to share with my friends because some of the recipes that are in my books are not necessarily meant for people that are on a raw vegan lifestyle for a while. They're kind of transitional recipes, which is the Living Foods for Everyone series that I'm writing right now. I think I have 8 books in there or something. I have another 10 that I'm going to add of different cuisines. Those are meant for a wider audience of people who are used to eating cooked foods or used to eating a standard American diet. This is a recipe that I eat, and I sometimes have it 3 or 4 times a week, depending upon my schedule. It's a very quick recipe. I'll show you a couple shortcuts, but it's inspired by my time in California. So when I was living in California, I had a garden, and I would also go to the farmer's market quite a bit and get all these fresh, amazing vegetables. And I drank a lot of coconuts when I was there too. They're fairly inexpensive, and using that young coconut meat was instrumental in some of my other recipes. So I think both of you and I have made coconut wraps, and I'm interested to see how yours comes out. So there's several different stages, but the first stage is to make a coconut wrap. So yours are green. That's kind of cool.
I put some spinach in that one, and then I have one that I put some beet juice in, and I have one that I mixed beet and carrot juice in and made a little swirly pattern. I had so much fun, but I love that the coconut gives you like a blank canvas because it's white. And
Yeah, the white coconut is, yeah, it gives you a blank canvas. Mine came out like, I don't know if you can see that, but it's kind of like a mottled, you can
Mhm.
still see the chunks of coconut in there. Kind of reminds me of like uh shadows coming through the forest, I guess. Kind
Oh,
of,
beautiful. I
yeah.
think the psyllium husks maybe affected the color.
Yeah, that's what it is. The basic ingredient is young coconut meat, and you can make a great wrap with just using young coconut meat, but it is not very resilient. So if it gets wet, it'll fall apart, and you kind of have to eat it a few minutes from when you've made it. So one of the tricks that I use in raw food chefing is to use psyllium husk, which is 0 calorie. It's made from a plant in the Plantagenaceae family, which is known as the plantain family, and it's just the seed of the plantain, just the husk of the seed, and that is pure fiber. Fiber is very important to our diet and to help eliminate waste as well as to give us bulk. And so mixing that with the coconut meat gives it this nice spongy texture. So you can see this one's actually fairly thick. So I just pureed about 2 cups of young coconut with about 2 tablespoons of psyllium husk, and then spread it out on a dehydrator sheet. And I only had to dehydrate mine for a couple hours, and I flipped it over halfway. But I think you'll probably put the recipe in the description or something.
I
So
will. And I just wanted to say that I use sunflower seeds instead of psyllium husks because
Mhm.
it's got natural lecithin in it. But I haven't, mine has a different texture, I think, than yours. Mine is like maybe a little bit thinner and softer. And maybe it was my dehydrator, but it took all night of dehydrating. And I did have to get up in the middle of the night and flip them over. So I probably should have done this in the daytime with it taking that long. So just so people know, if they vary the recipe, they will suffer the consequences as I did.
and I like that yours are round and mine are square. That's
Yeah. Well,
leave it
we're
open to
having a
interpretation.
nice variety of options today.
So I gave you a recipe for hot sauce, and I'd like to share that one. So I like things spicy. I don't use salt in my recipes. I encourage people to let go of added salt because we get plenty of salt in the diet that we're eating. I've been living without salt for many years, but it's not, I should say, living without added salt, without added sodium chloride, because there's many different types of salts that we use as catalysts for an enzymatic reaction, and our body needs them, but they're present in many foods, celery and tomatoes being fairly salty foods. So what I find is the hot sauce that we get in the store is often made of vinegar and salt, and that's really the flavors that dominate. But let me grab my serrano peppers on the bench here. And what I like out of a hot sauce is I like to taste the peppers. So these are some green serrano peppers, and you can get red ones, and just pureeing the peppers with garlic and then letting it sit out at room temperature for a day or two. That gives it a nice fermentation. So here's my serrano pepper. So
Nice.
did you end up making a hot sauce?
I didn't want to make it so hot, so I used an Anaheim chili and a
Uh-huh.
bell pepper. So mine's actually yellow because I used a yellow bell pepper. And then I also used the garlic. And I love that you said to let it sit out overnight because now it's not like at first the garlic was a little bit much, but now
Mhm.
it's perfect. So that was genius.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, it gives it time to kind of mellow out. So our other thing that we're going to be serving this is a tomato coulis. And so a coulis is essentially a puree of any fruit, tomato being a fruit. And then it's typically strained to make it kind of thin, but we're just going to blend it really thickly. And the sauce that I'm choosing to make today for my tomato coulis is one fresh tomato, about a quarter cup of sun-dried tomatoes, and I get mine that are actually dried. They're not in oil, and they don't have salt added to them. Sometimes you get them really crusted with salt, but if you get that, just rinse off the oil, rinse off the salt, and then we'll be mixing that with a trick that I accidentally learned from one of my friends at the fruit festival. I have to attribute this little trick to Grant Campbell. He sent me an email accidentally one time where he was confiding in a friend that he had this fantastic way to make a quick ketchup, and that was using allspice. So I have allspice here. It's a fruit of a tree. I think this is either the fruit or a bark. It's actually called allspice. It's not like a spice mixture. That's the name of the fruit. And I encourage you to try using this today, B, because
Oh, I did use it. It's so good. I
it
have
smells
mine
a
for
little
me.
cinnamony, nutmeggy.
Wonderful.
It's fantastic. So that'll be our first step. Let's make the sauce first because that's the easiest part.
So
I'm just
you don't dry your own tomatoes, because I just slice up a bunch of tomatoes, organic tomatoes that I get
Mhm.
from Costco, put them in the dehydrator, and then I have them ready to go, and then I don't have to worry about any added salt or oil. Do you do
Yeah,
that?
I do dry my own tomatoes, but I ate them already. I use them like potato chips.
Yeah, they're really good.
But these are just from my local market. I have a fantastic market that specializes in local food. So this is just me supporting the local community and just getting a nice sun-dried tomato. But look at the rich color that I have of this tomato. It's
Nice.
almost purple. So put your sun-dried tomatoes in and just chop up your fresh tomato. And that's all you really need. And you can add, I usually add about a teaspoon of allspice, but the first thing I encourage people to do is smell all your spices, right? And that'll kind of tell you how much to put in because this could have been sitting on the shelf for a year. It could be fresh. I like to grind things fresh too, but I just don't have an allspice tree here. So I'm gonna guess, put about half as much as you think is in here, but I'm gonna guess I'm gonna need about a teaspoon. And depending on how it comes out when it's all blended, I might add a little bit more. Remember, you can always add more, you just can't take them away, right?
Yes. Good rule of thumb.
So I'm gonna blend my tomato coulis real quick, and let me put this on mute just so it doesn't overwhelm anyone. And maybe you could, have you done the coulis yet?
I did my coulis, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe I'll go ahead and start putting it on my wrap. I'm gonna take some of this, put it on my wrap. And if your wrap is a little bit stiff and it doesn't want to bend or curl over very easily, once you put a sauce on like this, it'll soften it up a little bit and just let the juices soak in. And then when you put your veggies on, it will be ready for you to curl it up.
Yeah, so here's my blended coulis. So people are wondering why don't you just call this ketchup? Well, we're chefs, so we want to call things like we don't make mayonnaise, we make aiolis, right? So
Right.
if it actually could be considered maybe a chutney if you put in some onions and some garlic and maybe some more Indian style spices like garam masala. When you make this, you'll see that it starts out kind of thin, but what'll happen is the sun-dried tomatoes, don't soak them first, let them soak in the tomato juice. So that's why I'm making this first. I'm just gonna set this aside, and eventually this will be so thick that it will stand up on its own. But you see right now it's just kind of thin. So we'll check in with this after we're done with the rest of the recipe and see how it firmed up. Yeah, the only reason I like to have a thick tomato coulis is because I'll be plating it up kind of fancy. I have some flowers here and I wanted to stand up on its own. So I'm using this little tool. It's actually a cookie cutter, but this is one of the tools that you'll see that I've used in my Instagram posts or when I'm doing some catering for small groups is that I'll use tools like this and then actually put the coulis in here, and then I can use my plate more as like a canvas and slice my wrap and maybe even drizzle some of it over top. But I don't do this every day. When I eat this every day, I just more or less take a spoon and just spoon the coulis on top, take a bite of it, spoon more on top, and just take a bite. Very informal.
Okay,
So,
so I put mine right on the wrap.
yeah,
So
that's a fantastic way to do it too. Yep.
I like that there's lots of ways to do it.
Yeah. As I mentioned, this is a really quick recipe. So these are my flowers. I'll be using this to make everything look fantastic. And yes, I did grow all these myself. They're my spring flowers in my
Beautiful.
garden. And got some dandelions in there too. Don't forget your dandelions, but that's a key ingredient when you're making raw food. Incorporating flowers into your food is a fantastic way to make everything super, super fun. So you got your zucchini and a zoodler. So
Yeah, I
what do
have
you
one
use?
of those.
You have one of these
That's
too?
what I used. Yeah. I used to have the big hand crank one, but I love the little thing because you can take it with you on trips so much easier. It's just so convenient.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I use this more often than my big hand crank one because it's much easier to clean. But
Yes,
you'll
me too.
just watch how fast this will turn into a zoodle. So it has like a thick setting and a thin setting, and it's almost like instantaneous. You don't have to set anything up and put it on the counter, and then the blades are pretty hidden, so there's really no danger of cutting yourself on these. So the idea of this is to make it into an interesting shape. I guess we could just kind of chop the zucchini, but part of what we're doing here with these raw recipes is it gives us a lot of latitude to really play with the food and play with colors and play with shapes. So I have several different decoration machines or things that'll make this into all kinds of different shapes, like star shapes, and I have really thin ones, but this one is a perfect thickness. I like to make it, I guess, almost a real thick spaghetti, and then it holds the sauce a lot better. So there we go. So I got a nice bowl full of zucchini noodles. So you can just see how nice and thick they are, and they stay nice, stay dry too. So setting this aside, now we're going to set up some mushrooms. So are you going to chop some mushrooms with me?
I am using a lion's mane mushroom and I'm just
Oh.
going to tear it apart with my hands.
Oh, that's fantastic. Those are, from what I've had them a few times, and they're kind of like fuzzy, right?
Yes, they use it a lot for fake seafood because it's kind of like a shredded crab meat or like a shredded chicken meat or something like that. It's a very like nice clean flavor.
Wow. And that's and you live in California, so this California wrap is perfect for you because you get access to all these fantastic fruits and vegetables and mushrooms and things, probably right at your local market, right?
Yes, all of this is from our local co-op, but I know you're in Oregon, which is also a fantastic state with a lot of fantastic stuff. So I don't want to act like California is superior because I really like Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon is well known for its berries, and the edible class that I'm taking right now, we're going out and finding salmon berries and huckleberries, and there's a huge movement to pick wild mushrooms. In fact, just yesterday I was looking at all these amazing morel mushrooms that are actually wildcrafted locally, and then they sell them at the market. And they also had lion's mane, and one of my favorites, the king oyster mushrooms and hedgehog mushrooms and yellowfoot mushrooms and chanterelles, and we even have some truffles too, which cost an arm and a leg, even though they're wildcrafted. But
Wow.
yeah, I'm developing a French recipe book right now that'll be out probably at the end of June, where I'm using all these fancy mushrooms. But today I'm just using, shouldn't say just using, but I'm using creminis, and these are pretty easy to find. So the next ingredient is going to be cherry tomatoes or plum tomatoes or whatever kind of little miniature tomatoes. I usually quarter them just to get them the juice, and mostly because they fit into the wrap a little bit better when they're quartered. But I got a whole bunch of different varieties of tomatoes. I think these are cherries and plum tomatoes, and must be someone with a greenhouse in my town because it's just started to become spring here. So we're not getting our tomatoes yet, but I think someone was secretly growing them. And look at all these fantastic colors. I get these
I love it.
these green ones and the red ones and the yellow ones. So I'll just do a few here.
That's what I have also. Almost the exact same thing as you. I wonder if they came from the same farm.
Oh, yeah, I like the green ones because they're a little bit more firm, and see they're actually green on the inside. So the reason I'm calling this a California wrap is because the arugula just reminds me so much of California. And here's my arugula. So I use the little baby arugula, and it's nice spicy green, and I'll just eat it on its own. I think it's it's a standalone green, but you could of course use red leaf lettuce or romaine lettuce, as long as it's chopped pretty finely, or even spinach or finely shredded kale. So how's your arugula look?
I have arugula microgreens. So I think we were both thinking the same thing about having them be little small, tiny leaves and tiny pieces. But I agree with you, the peppery flavor of arugula is so nice. I think it's going to really complement this.
I think I just did the purple onion, and so
Okay.
I'm going to be adding that to it. You could of course use scallions, but I like the bite of purple onion. It's adds a nice little color to it. That's just part of the fun of being a raw or living vegan chef, is the colors stay vibrant in your final product. And when you're cooking things, sometimes those colors end up just being like dulled and gray. But in raw vegan chefing, if you use something purple, I mean, all these vibrant colors, this is what it's going to look like when we're about to eat it. So, but if
Beautiful.
we're going to boil this and cook this down or something like in traditional cooking, they wouldn't retain those beautiful colors.
Right. Well, brown is a popular color in cooked food. And as we know, whenever things turn brown, that means that it's going to have a aging effect. It's
Mhm.
going to create all kinds of free radicals. So when we see these colors as opposed to brown, that means that our food is still alive and it's going to enliven us as well.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Yeah, the Maillard reaction.
I always
That's,
pronounce that wrong.
yeah, I don't know how to say it either. I think the that reaction is what often people attribute to as flavor, but that flavor actually comes at quite a cost, because that Maillard reaction increases the cancer risk of any food.
Let's take a moment to allow me to explain this to you. The Maillard reaction is a chemical reaction between amino acids and reducing sugars that gives browned food its distinctive flavor. Seared steaks, fried dumplings, cookies, and other kinds of biscuits, breads, toasted marshmallows, and many other foods undergo this reaction. It is named after French chemist Louis Camille Maillard, who first described it in 1912 while attempting to reproduce biological protein synthesis. The reaction is a form of non-enzymatic browning, which typically proceeds rapidly from around 140 to 165 degrees. Many recipes call for an oven temperature high enough to assure that a Maillard reaction occurs. At higher temperatures, caramelization and subsequently pyrolysis become more pronounced. The reactive carbonyl group of the sugar reacts with the nucleophilic amino group of the amino acid and forms a complex mixture of poorly characterized molecules responsible for a range of aromas and flavors. But, dun dun dun, here's the bad part of it. Here's an article that was published in the scientific journal Molecules about the Maillard reaction and the advanced glycation end products, otherwise known as AGE or RAGE, not ironically. As we just discussed, advanced glycation end products are generated by non-enzymatic modifications of macromolecules, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids by saccharides, glucose, fructose, and pentose via Maillard reaction, that browning that we just discussed that happens in the food. The problem is that these AGEs, or age-related diseases, include physiological aging, neurodegenerative, neuroinflammatory diseases, diabetes mellitus and its complications, autoimmune rheumatic inflammatory diseases, bone degenerative diseases, and chronic renal diseases. It also induces inflammation and immunosuppression. It also causes vascular, endothelial, smooth muscle, connective tissue, cell, and renal, mesangial, endothelial, podocytic cell damage. As if that wasn't enough to scare you away from foods that are subjected to the Maillard reaction, as Chef Ocean mentioned, there are carcinogens that are also produced when foods are browned. This is a study, a Swedish study, of course you would know about the Swedish study. As long ago as April 2002, researchers from the Swedish National Food Administration reported that they detected elevated levels of acrylamide in commonly consumed baked and fried foods, i.e. our browned foods. Acrylamide is known as a neurotoxin in humans and as a carcinogen in experimental animals, and it was classified as a probable human carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the IARC, a very highly respected organization, as long ago as 1994. It's scientific studies like these that have convinced so many health-loving people to eat their food raw, referred to by many of us as the way nature intended.
So I got some perfect avocados here that I was able to slice or scoop out in a single scoop. So again, this is why I'm calling this the California wrap, because we're using these wonderful, wonderful avocados that I can't grow here in Oregon, and was one of the first foods that I just gorged myself on when I first moved to California. You get this beautiful, I mean, look at that color.
Yes.
So I really lucked out with this avocado. All right, and I think we're ready. How are you doing? Do you have everything chopped?
I've been assembling mine as we go, so I guess I'm doing it wrong. I'm looking forward to seeing what your stuff looks like laid out, all pretty. Mine looks really beautiful put together. I mean, it's just a colorful dish no matter what you do. It's great ingredients.
I do have a trick. I'll show you the shortcut. And I'm not sponsored by either of these companies, but I just wanted to show you. I use this hot sauce, which I think is actually local to Eugene, Oregon, which is essentially just red Serrano fermented hot sauce. This is another shortcut, is just to use these raw coconut wraps instead of dehydrating your own coconut. But those are also more expensive options, because what we're doing here by buying the coconut for the coconut wrap ourselves and then fermenting our own hot sauce, you save like 90% on the cost of the food that way by making it yourself.
It tastes better. I've had those coconut wraps and I find them to be a little bit rigid and hard to bite through. And
Yep.
this is just such a lovely texture. I've already snuck a few bites of another one that I made, and it's like just a lovely soft bread. It's just so easy to eat.
Yeah, and I think making the food yourself, like having a Sunday prep day, where you just make like, 10 wraps or something like that, that can carry you through the whole week. And I think it might be good for us to talk about the idea of people saying raw foods or raw vegan cuisine or living vegan cuisine is so time consuming. But in my opinion, when you're buying these convenience foods, someone has to put that time in somewhere, right? Is that wrap that I just showed you didn't magically appear out of nowhere. So, but you're paying for someone else's time. But if you're making large quantities, making one is just as easy as making 10. It's just the quantity. And I think that it's important in our society, especially the American society, for us to take the time with our food and not rush through things. Whenever I go to Sweden, I always have to put aside that American tendency to eat food as fast as possible so I can go on and do something else. But food should really be an event in our lives.
Yes. And the more we connect with the food, the more we appreciate it. I think that's probably where the concept of taking a moment to say a word of gratitude before you eat your food is taking that time rather than just jumping right in and scarfing it down. Be mindful of what it is that you're eating. And when you really connect with it, and yes, you're grateful for something this beautiful and this healthy, it just is going to make you want it more and continue on that trajectory.
Oh, I love that, Bea. That's a fantastic sentiment.
I have a raw burger that I made out of beets and carrots and essentially the leftovers from my juicer. I had it sitting there and I thought, you know what, I might crumble up a little bit of this on there too, because it's just going to add a little bit to the color and just a little, I don't know. Do I have your permission?
Of course. Yeah, this is your wrap.
Okay.
That's why I didn't call it an avocado arugula zoodle wrap. I call it a California wrap.
Okay, so I am in California, so I can do whatever I want.
You can do whatever you want. Whatever reminds you of California can go into this wrap.
Awesome.
And I covered mine with a liberal helping of hot sauce. And in fact, I put so much stuff on this that I'm not sure I'm going to be able to roll it up properly, but we'll give it a shot.
Me neither. Okay, I have my hot sauce. Drizzle. But even if I can't roll this up, I will find a way to get it into my mouth. No worries.
Yeah, I did stuff mine a little bit too big, but that's okay. I'm going to make 2 wraps, so I'll put the rest of it in the second wrap. There we go. All right, let's see what this looks like when we slice it up. One thing that I like about this recipe is that you can really impress someone with such a simple wrap if you just slice it across the center, so the way it looks now, not so impressive, but look what happens when I slice it. You get to see all those fantastic ingredients on the inside.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's really, really nice. And then put in some of my flowers on here.
Nice.
And just before, I know there's going to be someone in the YouTube comments that's going to say, hey, you're putting poisonous flowers on your plate. I know, I probably am putting poisonous flowers on my plate because not all these flowers are necessarily edible, but I want this to look pretty. And I would normally just put like roses on here because roses are edible. But these are, I think, some rhododendrons. I know these dandelions are edible. So, and just to make it look nice, just to decorate it for my picture here, and then I'll take all the flowers off. So no one needs to worry about me accidentally eating something that might make me sick. So there we go. There's my
Beautiful.
California wrap.
I love it. I love what you did with the flowers. It's so nice. So many things in our garden are flowering right now. We have kale that has flowers on it. We have arugula that has flowers on it in the garden. And so I'll go out there and I'll just gather the flowers right off of those and eat them. And it's, you know, I've heard people say in other YouTube videos, there's so much prana in the flowers. And it's true. I always repeat that. The energy, the excitement that you feel when you have the flower from the plant like that is amazing.
Yeah, I actually was planning on putting some rosemary flowers on here too, but I just didn't get a chance to go on my walk yet today. So I'll be doing that later today. But yeah, lavender flowers, rosemary flowers. Let me switch my camera here so we can get a nice shot. There we go.
I'm already taking a bite of mine. So good. Oh, that's beautiful.
And I'm gonna make one more. I actually haven't eaten lunch today either, so I'm gonna. But let's see if we can get there we go, nice headshot with me in the wrap. And that wrap is about to become me too, right? That's what I liked when you said it takes some time to appreciate your food, because that food's going to be with you for quite a while. All right, so let me do one more wrap while you're eating yours, and let's talk about some other things. So what other things do you think you might put in here to make it more fun? I thought olives might be a fun one to put in here too.
Olives would be fun. I have to, I always rinse my olives off because they're soaking in salt water, of course. So that's the only thing about the olives is I just try to not eat them very often or eat them very sparsely or, rinse them well. But yeah, olives are great. Gosh, seems like almost anything could go in here. All different kinds.
Yeah, I like your idea of putting the burger in there. That's really nice. And maybe some spiced, I know you use sunflower seeds in your wrap, but I thought maybe mixing some sprouted sunflowers with some taco seasoning, and making like a little taco meat and putting that in there too. I realized that I forgot to put my tomato coulis, so let's revisit what that looks like now. So this is actually firmed up quite a bit. So here's my tomato coulis.
Nice.
Those beautiful colors.
Yeah, that is nice and thick now.
So what happened is the sun-dried tomatoes have now absorbed some of the liquid. I'm going to use my cookie cutter and show you an alternative plating here. So I've got my wrap, and then just using that cookie cutter and spooning it in here, it suddenly makes everything just look so much more elegant when you have these little nice shapes on the plate. So there we go. And then maybe we'll top that with, let's see, what do we have here? I have, a daisy. That'll look really nice.
Nice.
There we go. This is a daisy from my garden.
Nice.
And then let's see, what else do I need to put on here? I think I'm ready to do my second wrap, and then we'll slice it a little differently. I love how this coconut wrap came out with this extra psyllium. Some people aren't very tolerant of psyllium, just because it's a lot of fiber, but I find it to be really useful in a lot of cooking. And that's the kind of the analogy of when you're doing raw food chefing, what do you use to get different textures? And I noticed that you mentioned pectin.
I was talking about lecithin, but pectin is another important factor to think about.
Oh, that's right, lecithin. So those are naturally occurring things that make things more, that kind of help things stay firm together.
Right.
And so if you wanted to put apple in this wrap, that would also help a lot too. In fact, you could make this wrap, if you didn't want to use coconut, you could use like apple and zucchini together.
That's a
And
good
that
idea.
would be really fun because really what you're looking for is to have something that doesn't fall apart when you pick it up. So, all right, let me get some flowers on this one.
So apple and zucchini would be the option for people who are concerned about the fat content of coconut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I'm the head chef at the Woodstock Fruit Festival, and there's some people that want to only eat fruit. So it's very challenging sometimes for me to come up with recipes for that audience that use exclusively fruit. But if you were using apple and zucchini, as you and I both know, that's actually a fruit.
Right.
We'll get another shot. So this is two different platings. So here's my second plating
Beautiful.
of the wrap. There we go. So this is going to be my dinner, and then here's the first plating. So there we go. I think we had a very successful recipe excursion here.
Yes,
Recipe
I
adventure.
hope you have a friend there to eat the other one. Or somebody you can give it to, because that's somebody's gonna luck out.
It's very easy to make friends as a raw vegan chef, let me tell you that. So that was our California wrap with tomato coulis, and now I get to eat these fantastic wraps. Looks like you've already eaten yours.
I
So-
did. I ate half of it.
Here's the final test. This is how I eat it. I'd usually take the wrap and just put the tomato coulis just on top, and that way I get some on each bite. And let's see how I did. Mmm. 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 We made a good recipe today. This is a fantastic one.
Well, your recipe, thank you for allowing me to join you. This is kind of like a fantasy of mine come true after watching you and your girlfriend on YouTube for so long. And I really appreciate you letting me join you in this today and
Of
for
course.
sharing this with our audience. This is a fabulous recipe for athletes, for people trying to turn their health around. So it's definitely a vegan health and fitness approved recipe. So thank you again for joining me. Was there anything that you wanted to add to our, I know we've had a really long interview. If there's anything you'd like to add here at the end, or anything you'd like to plug? I know you said you have some new books coming out.
My most recent excursion has been with doing French food. Fairly challenging food, but I'll be coming out with a French book in the next couple months. If you go onto my Instagram account, which is rawvegan.love, you'll see some pictures of my past recipes as well as links, and you can buy them right in the IG store, links to my current book. So I have a Mexican book, one that I did with Miami fruit. I have an American book, a continental breakfast book. And then if you go onto my website, which is also rawvegan.love, you can sign up for my newsletter and find out when all my new books are coming out. And I think my books are fairly reasonably priced. They're all ebooks. And I encourage people to take pictures and post them on Instagram and reach out to me if they have any questions. But really, this is all about sharing food. You know, I want this food to be accessible for everyone, and I want people to enjoy their food again. And cooking, I think, is something we all share as a love and something that I grew up with. But I think uncooking is the next level, and that's the raw food version of cooking, which is we uncook things. We're preparing food and we're celebrating. It's a fantastic thing to do with your kids because you don't need hot stoves or anything like that. So that's really what I'd like to see more of in the world, and it really starts with simple recipes like this one.
Great. I feel the same way. Thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon there and the rest of your beautiful wrap. And I am going to enjoy mine now.
Excellent. Thank you, Via. And enjoy the interview. Thank you so much for spending time with me.
My pleasure. Take
All right.
care.
Bye.